Section 14 of Highways in Hiding by George O. Smith. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 14. I left Homestead with a half-formed idea that I was going to visit Bruce, Wisconsin, long enough to say goodbye to Catherine and to release her from any matrimonial involvement she may have felt binding. I did not relish this idea, but I felt that getting it out, done, and agreed was only a duty. But as I hit the road and had time to think, I knew that my half-formed intention was a sort of martyrdom. I was going to renounce myself in a fine welter of tears and then go staggering off into the setting sun to die of my mental wounds. I took careful stock of myself and faced the fact that my half-baked idea was a sort of suicide wish. Walking into any Mekstrom way station now was just asking for capture and a fast trip to their reorientation rooms. The facts of my failure and my taking of leave would be indication enough for Catherine that I was bowing out. It would be better for Catherine, too, to avoid a fine, high-strung emotional scene. I remembered the little bawling session in the Harrison living room that night. Catherine would not die for want of a sympathetic hand on her shoulder. In fact, as she'd said pragmatically, well-balanced people never die of broken hearts. Having finally convinced myself of the validity of this piece of obvious logic, I suddenly felt a lot better. My morose feeling faded away, my conviction of utter uselessness died, and my half-formed desire to investigate a highly hypothetical hereafter took an abrupt about-face. And in place of this collection of undesirable self-pities came a much nicer emotion. It was a fine feeling, that royal anger that boiled up inside of me. I couldn't lick 'em and I couldn't join 'em. So I was going out to pull something down, even if it all came down around my own ears. I stopped long enough to check the Bonanza 375 both visually and perceptively, and then loaded it full. I consulted a road map to chart a course. Then I took off with the coal wide open and the damper rods all the way out, and made the wheels roll towards the east. I especially gave all the highways a very wide berth. I went down several, but always in the wrong direction. And in the meantime I kept my sense of perception on the alert for any pursuit. I drove with my eyes alone. I could have made it across the Mississippi by nightfall if I'd not taken the time to duck highway signs. But when I got good and sick and tired of driving, I was not very far from the river. I found a motel in a rather untraveled spot and sacked in for the night. I awoke at the crack of dawn with a feeling of impending something. It was not doom, because any close danger would have nudged me on the bump of perception. Nor was it good, because I'd have awakened looking forward to it. Something odd was up and doing. I dressed hastily, and as I pulled my clothing on, I took a slow dig at the other cabins in the motel. Number 1 contained a salesman type, I decided after digging through his baggage. Number 2 was occupied by an elderly couple who were loaded with tourist-type junk and 4 or 5 cameras. Number 3 harbored a stopover truck driver, and number 4 was almost overflowing with a gang of schoolgirls packed sardine-wise in the single bed. Number 5 was mine. Number 6 was vacant. Number 7 was also vacant, but the bed was tumbled, and the water in the washbowl was still running out, and the door was still slamming, and the little front steps were still clicking to the fast clip of high heels, and I hauled myself out of my cabin on a dead gallop and made a fast line for my car. I hit the car, clawed myself inside, wound up the turbine, and let the old heap in gear in one unbroken series of motions. The wheels spun and sent back a hail of gravel, and then they took a bite out of the parking lot, and the takeoff snapped my head back. Both Esper and Eyesight were very busy cross-stitching a crooked course through the parking lot between the parked cars and the trees that were intended to lend the outfit a rustic atmosphere. so I was too busy to take more than a vague notice of a hand that clamped onto the door frame until the door opened and closed again. By then I was out on the highway and I could relax a bit. "Steve," she said, "why do you do these things?" Yeah, it was Marion Harrison. "I didn't ask to get shoved into this mess," I growled. "You didn't ask to be born either," she said. I didn't think the argument was very logical, and I said so. "Life wasn't too hard to bear until I met you people," I told her very sourly. "Life would be very pleasant if you'd go away. On the other hand, life is all I've got, and it's far better than the alternative, so if I'm making your life miserable, that goes double for me." "Why not give it up?" she asked me. I stopped the car. I eyed her dead center, eye to eye, until she couldn't take it any more. "What would you like me to just give up, Marion? Shall I please everybody by taking a bite of my hip pocket artillery sights whilst testing the trigger pull with one forefinger? Will it make anybody happy if I walk into the nearest reorientation museum, blowing smoke out of my nose and claiming that I am a tea kettle that's got to be taken off the stove before I blow my lid?" Marion's eyes dropped. "Do you yourself really expect me to seek blessed oblivion?" She shook her head slowly. "Then for the love of God, what do you expect of me?" I roared. "As I am, I'm neither flesh nor fish, just foul. I'm not likely to give up, Marion. If I'm a menace to you and to your kind, it's just too tough. But if you want me out of your hair, you'll have to wrap me up in something suitable for framing and haul me kicking and screaming to your mind refurbishing department, because I'm not having any on my own. Understand?" "I understand, Steve," she said softly. "I know you. We all know you and your type. You can't give up. You're unable to." "Not when I've been hypnoed into it," I said. Marion's head tossed disdainfully. "Thorndyke's hypnotic suggestion was very weak," she explained. "He had to plant the idea in such a way as to remain unidentified afterwards. No, Steve, your urge has always been your own personal drive. All that Thorndyke did was to point you slightly in our direction and give you a nudge. You did the rest." "Well, you're a telepath. Maybe you're also capable of planting a post-hypnotic suggestion that I forget the whole idea." "I'm not," she said with a sudden flare. I looked at her. Not being a telepath, I couldn't read a single thought, but it was certain that she was telling the truth, and telling it in such a manner as to be convincing. Finally I said, "Marion, if you know that I'm not to be changed by logic or argument, why do you bother?" For a full minute she was silent. Then her eyes came up and gave it back to me with their electric blue. "For the same reason that Scholar Phelps hoped to use you against us," she said. "Your fate and your future is tied up with ours whether you turn out to be friend or enemy." I grunted. "Sounds like a soap opera, Marion," I told her bitterly. "Will Catherine find solace in Philip's arms? Will Steve catch Mekstrom's disease? Will the dastardly Scholar Phelps—" "Stop it," she cried. "All right. I'll stop as soon as you tell me what you intend to do with me now that you've caught up with me again." She smiled. "Steve, I'm going along with you, partly to play the telepath half of your team, if you'll trust me to deliver the truth, and partly to see that you don't get into trouble that you can't get out of again." My mind curled its lip. Pappy had tanned my landing gear until I was out of the habit of using Mother for protection against the slings and arrows of outrageous school chums. I'd not taken sanctuary behind a woman's skirt since I was 8, so the idea of running under the protection of a woman went against the grain, even though I knew that she was my physical superior by no sensible proportion. Being cared for physically by a dame of 110, 18, didn't sit well on me. Do you believe me, Steve? I've got to. You're here to stay. I'm a sucker for a good-looking woman anyway, it seems. They tell me anything, and I'm not hard-hearted enough to even indicate that I don't believe them. She took my arm impulsively, then she let me go before she pinched it off at the elbow. Steve, she said earnestly, believe me and let me be your better half. I finished sourly. Please don't, she said plaintively. Steve, you've simply got to trust somebody. I looked into her face coldly. The hardest job in the world for a non-telepath is to locate someone he can trust. The next hardest is to explain that to a telepath, because telepaths can't see any difficulty in weeding out the non-trustworthy. Now, you still haven't faced the facts. Neither of you, Marion. You intend to go along with me, ostensibly to help me in whatever I intend to do. That's fine. I'll accept it. But you know good and well that I intend to carry on and on until something cracks. Now, tell me honestly, are you going along to help me crack something wide open, or just to steer me into channels that will not result in a crack-up for your side? Marion Harrison looked down for a moment. I didn't need telepathy to know that I'd touched the sore spot. Then she looked up and said, Steve, more than anything I intend to keep you out of trouble. You should know by now that there is very little you can really do to harm either side of our own private little war. And if I can't harm either side, I can hardly do either side any good. She nodded. Yet, I must be of some importance. She nodded again. At that point, I almost gave up. I'd been around this circle so many times in the past half-year that I knew how the back of my head looked. Always the same old question. Cherchez l'angle, I thought in bum French. Something I had was important enough to both sides to make them keep me on the loose instead of erasing me and my nuisance value. So far as I could see, I was as useless to either side as a coat of protective paint laid on stainless steel. I was immune to Mekstrom's disease, the immunity of one who has had everything tried on him that scholars of the disease could devise. About the only thing that ever took place was the sudden disappearance of everybody that I came in contact with. Marion touched my arm gently. You mustn't think like that, Steve, she said gently. You've done enough useless self-condemnation. Can't you stop accusing yourself of some evil factor? Something that really is not so. Not until I know the truth, I replied. I certainly can't dig it. I'm no telepath. Perhaps if I were, I'd not be in this awkward position. Again her silence proved to me that I'd hit a touchy spot. What am I? I demanded sourly. Am I a great big curse? What have I done other than to be present just before several people turn up missing? Makes me sort of a male typhoid Mary, doesn't it? Now, Steve. Well, maybe that's the way I feel. Everything I put my great big clutching hands on turns dark green and starts to rot. Regardless of which side they're on, it goes 1, 2, 3, 4. Catherine, Thorndyke, you, Nurse Farrow. Steve, what on earth are you talking about? I smiled down at her in a crooked sort of quirk. You, of course, have not the faintest idea of what I'm thinking. Oh, Steve. And then again, maybe you're doing your best to lead my puzzled little mind away from what you consider a dangerous subject? I'd hardly do that. Sure you would. I'd do it if our positions were reversed. I don't think it unadmirable to defend one's own personal stand, Marion. But you'll not divert me this time. I have a hunch that I am a sort of male typhoid Mary. Let's call me old Mekstrom Steve. the carrier of Mekstrom's disease, who can innocently or maliciously go around handing it out to anybody that I contact. Is that it, Marion?" "It's probably excellent logic, Steve, but it isn't true." I eyed her coldly. "How can I possibly believe you?" "That's the trouble," she said with a plaintive cry. "You can't. You've got to believe me on faith, Steve." I smiled crookedly. "Marion," I said, "that's just the right angle to take. Since I cannot read your mind, I must accept the old appeal to the emotions. I must tell myself that Marion Harrison just simply could not lie to me for many reasons, among which is that people do not lie to blind men nor cause the cripple any hurt. Well, phooey. Whatever kind of gambit is being played here, it is bigger than any of its parts or pieces. I'm something between a queen and a pawn, Marion, a piece that can be sacrificed at any time to further the progress of the game. Slipping me a lie or two to cause me to move in some desired direction should come as a natural." "But why would we lie to you?" she asked, and then she bit her lip. I think that she slipped, that she hadn't intended to urge me into deeper consideration of the problem, lest I succeed in making a sharp analysis. After all, the way to keep people from figuring things out is to stop them from thinking about the subject. That's the first rule. Next comes the process of feeding them false information if the first law cannot be invoked. "Why would you lie to me?" I replied in a sort of sneer. I didn't really want a sneer, but it came naturally. In an earlier age, it might not be necessary. "What?" she asked in surprise. "Might not be necessary," I said. "Let's assume that we are living in the mid-50s before Rhine. Steve Cornell turns up being a carrier of a disease that is really a blessing instead of a curse. In such a time, Marion, either side could sign me up openly as a sort of missionary. I could go around the country inoculating the right people, those citizens who have the right kind of mind, attitude, or whatever factor. Following me could be a cleanup corps to collect the whites who'd been inoculated by my contact. Sounds reasonable, doesn't it?" Without waiting for either protest or that downcast look of agreement, I went on. "But now we have perception and telepathy all over the place. So Steve Cornell, the carrier, must be pushed around from pillar to post, meeting people and inoculating them without ever knowing what he is doing. Because once he knows what he is doing, his usefulness is ended in this world of Rhine Institute." "Steve," she started, but I interrupted again. "About all I have to do now is to walk down any main street radiating my suspicions," I said bitterly, "and it's off to medical center for Steve, unless the highways catch me first." Very quietly, Marion said, "We really dislike to use reorientation on people. It changes them so." "But that's what I'm headed for, isn't it?" I demanded flatly. "I'm sorry, Steve." Angrily, I went on, not caring that I'd finally caught on and by doing so had sealed my own package. "So after I have my mind ironed out smoothly, I'll still go on and on from pillar to post providing newly inoculated Mekstroms for your follow-up squad." She looked up at me and there were tears in her eyes. "We were all hoping," she started. "Were you?" I asked roughly. "Were you all working to inoculate me at Homestead, or were you really studying me to find out what made me a carrier instead of a victim?" "Both, Steve," she said, and there was a ring of honesty in her tone. I had to believe her. It made sense. "Dismal prospect, isn't it?" I asked, "for a guy that's done nothing wrong." "We're all sorry." "Look," I said with a sudden thought, "why can't I still go on? I could start a way station of some sort on some pretext and go on inoculating the public as they come past. Then I could go on working for you and still keep my right mind." She shook her head. "Scholar Phelps knows," she said. "Above all things, we must keep you out of his hands. He'd use you for his own purpose." I grunted sourly. "He has already, and he will again," I told her. "Not only that, but Phelps has had plenty of chance to collect me on or off the hook. So what you fear does not make sense." "It does now," she told me seriously. "So long as you did not suspect your own part in the picture, you could do more good for Phelps by running free. Now you know, and Phelps' careful herding of your motions won't work." "Don't get it." "Watch," she said with a shrug. "They'll try. I don't dare experiment, Steve, or I'd leave you right now. You'd find out very shortly that you're with me because I got here first. And knowing the score makes me also dangerous to your highways. Likely to bring 'em out of hiding?" "Yes." "So now that I've dumped over the old apple cart, I can assume that you're here to take me in." "What else can I do, Steve?" she asked unhappily. I couldn't answer that. I just sat there looking at her and trying to remember that her shapely 118 pounds were steel-hard and monster-strong, and that she could probably carry me under one arm all the way to Homestead without breathing hard. I couldn't cut and run. She could outrun me. I couldn't slug her on the jaw and get away. I'd break my hand. The Bonanza 375 would probably stun her, but I have not the cold-blooded viciousness to pull a gun on a woman and drill her. I grunted sourly. That weapon had been about as useful to me as a stuffed bear or an authentic Egyptian obelisk. "Well, I'm not going," I said stubbornly. She looked at me in surprise. "What are you going to do?" she asked me. I felt a glow of self-confidence. If I could not run loose with guilty knowledge of my being a Mekstrom carrier, it was equally impossible for anybody to kidnap me and carry me across the country. I'd radiate like mad. I'd complain about the situation at every crossroad, at every filling station, before every farmer. I'd complain mentally and bitterly, and sooner or later someone would get suspicious. "Don't think like an idiot," she told me sharply. "You drove across the country before, remember? How many people did you convince?" "I wasn't trying then." "How about the people in the hotel in Denver?" she asked me pointedly. "What good did you do there?" "Very little, but—" "One of the advantages of a telepath is that we can't be taken by surprise," she informed me, "because no one can possibly work without plans of some kind." "One of the troubles of a telepath," I told her right back, "is that they get so confounded used to knowing what is going to happen next that it takes all the pleasant element of surprise out of their lives. That makes them dull, and the element of surprise came in through the back window, passed between us, and went splat against the windshield. There was a sound like someone chipping ice with a spike, followed by the distant bark of a rifle. A second slug came through the back window about the time that the first one landed on the floor of the car. The second slug, not slowed by the shatterproof glass in the rear, went through the shatterproof glass in the front. A third slug passed through the same tunnel. These were warning shots. He'd missed us intentionally. He'd proved it by firing 3 times through the same hole from beyond my Esper range. I wound up the machinery and we took off. Marion cried something about not being foolish, but her words were swept out through the hole in the rear window, just above the marks on the pavement caused by my tires as we spun the wheels. End of chapter 14.